It's July 6th, 1928, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Ariel, Rebecca, and Ollie, the Retrospectors.
According to the advert that was published on the 6th of July 1928, sliced bread is the greatest forward step in the baking industry since bread was wrapped.
People were crying out for sliced and wrapped bread. This was 1 year after the invention of the modern pop-up toaster. And if you think about it, until the invention of the modern pop-up toaster, people, you had toasting forks to toast your piece of bread on.
Well, or you get your staff to do it.
With your ironed newspaper. But until the invention of the pop-up toaster, you didn't really matter how thick your bread was. It was just however thick you wanted it to be. That was the first thing that made you have to have some kind of uniformity to your slices.
Exactly. There was no regulation. So the inventor of sliced bread was this guy, Otto Rohweder, who was an Iowa-born, Missouri-based, this I loved, I found it somewhere, he was an itinerant jeweler. I don't really know what that means, but I guess he was homeless.
I think I know what it means. And I'm going to take issue with your description of him as the inventor of sliced bread. I mean, that is patently ridiculous. People had sliced bread for hundreds of years.
Yes.
But he was the inventor of the sliced bread machine. And I think what they mean by itinerant jeweler is that this basically was his side hustle. I find this quite reassuring for any of us that are working on projects in our spare time, because his degree was in optics, and he owned 3 jewellery stores, and basically of an evening he developed the world's first bread slicing machine because he had a vision. In 1917, a fire destroyed his prototype and the blueprints 11 years before he finally got round to building the thing. Like, can you imagine being married to this man every evening for 11 years? No, I can't sit and toast at the fire like some
heathen.
The reasons have been kind of lost to history as well. I mean, there are a few things, online they describe him as, a keen amateur inventor, which is one thing, but his origin story has kind of been lost in the mists of time. We don't know why bread.
No, we don't know why itinerant. There's so many things we don't know.
Because he's restless, because he had a dream.
But I do find that, I found that also reassuring, given that he'd had this epiphany for the bread slicing machine a good 16 years before the thing came out. That's another thing for anyone with a side hustle. Don't worry about it. Give it 16 years. You'll come good in the end. But ultimately, the machine was brought out by the Chillicothe Baking Company in 1928, and it was an instant success. Within 2 years of this machine coming out, 90% of all bread sold in America was produced by a bread slicing machine.
But the historic machine itself from Chillicothe is no more, because it fell apart after 6 months of heavy use. And the one that you can now see in the Chillicothe Sliced Bread Museum or similar, on loan from the Smithsonian, is the second machine, which had been created for Korn's Bakery in Davenport, Iowa. In itself a historic bakery, which had been written about as early as 1880. People were saying that the owner was very progressive, very interested in the future of baking, and there's an astonishing photograph of the staff from his bakery in 1903. Imagine what they look like. Quite serious people sitting around a giant pretzel.
Well, also quite progressive is the Chillicothe Constitution Tribune newspaper. They actually deigned to report on the debut of the bread slicing machine on the 6th of July, 1928, and they noted that while some people might find sliced bread, quote, startling, the housewife could expect a thrill of pleasure when she first sees a loaf of this bread, with each slice the exact counterpart of its fellows.
Well, one of the things actually that they had done experiments on before the release of this machine was actually what the correct slice width was, and they found it to be about half an inch or 1.27 centimetres. So for a long time that was kind of the regulation size, which I suppose would have tied in nicely with toaster manufacturers.
One thing I found weird about that research as well was that he carried it out. This was actually before he brought the bread machine out, so he was really just doing this as a private citizen. He took out ads in newspapers to poll housewives on optimum bread thickness, and get this, you have to keep in mind that Facebook groups hadn't been invented yet. He got 30,000 responses.
Wow.
Yeah, but that is absolutely a progenitor of what you get on social media now, isn't it? Take this personality test and it all seems fun and harmless, and like madly people click through.
What sort of bread are you?
Yeah. I'm a toasty.
You are sourdough.
I did see a Facebook post the other day that had a picture of a cutlery drawer, and it said, please tell me this is the right way to put your cutlery, and it was, like knife, fork, spoon or something, and that had like thousands of comments underneath, people saying what order they put their cutlery in the cutlery drawer.
Well,
so
they know they're voting in the next Russian general election.
Well, maybe one of the reasons that there were so many responses to a poll like that is the popularity of bread, which today is the most eaten foodstuff in the world. Obviously, bread dates a long, long way back. It started 30,000 years ago, according to the archaeological records that we're able to dig up. And then the commercialization of yeast started in 300 BC in ancient Egypt. Ancient Mesopotamians then refined flour about 800 BC. So this has been going on for a long time.
In 1943, there was a short-lived ban on sliced bread as a paper-saving measure in the USA. It only lasted 6 weeks. The New York Times printed a letter from a housewife complaining about this. And it was actually, although they printed it with a sort of tongue-in-cheek vibe to it.
Because it was from a woman, a contribution from a woman.
It was actually quite, touching. She described how she had 4 children and a husband who obviously couldn't be expected to cut his own bread. So she had to cut 10 slices in the morning and 20 slices at lunchtime, etc. And I thought, well, it's true that must have been like quite a time-saving measure for the average housewife. And it
so hold on, they were trying to save paper, but they printed a letter about it in the newspaper.
And they obviously sold loads of copies because they ended up doing a U-turn on the ban. So.
Just wrap your bread up in that newspaper.
Wrap the bread up in the newspaper, exactly, like good old British fish and chips, had it right all along.
But the current trajectory is away from the thing that came to be the sort of American loaf, white bread, sliced all neat, lots of preservatives. And actually there's been a sort of rebellion against that more recently. And the last time they did a study on this in the UK, white sliced sales were down 12% in the 5 years to 2017, which isn't surprising given the sort of appearance of artisanal bakeries and the rise of sourdough and this sort of encouragement for people to both do their own or at least buy it from a local baker rather than just going straight to the supermarket for the soft stuff.
Yeah, my house is full of bread now. Like, there are so many different types of bread. Like, there's, like, baps of some description that we have at lunchtime. There's bread that my wife bakes that's for the kids' toast in the morning. There are tortillas in the freezer. There are naans in the cupboard. When I was a kid growing up, there was only, like, Mother's Pride and Kingsmill. That was bread. I didn't know that other types of bread existed.
I did see the other day, BBC Archive had posted a news clip from I think it was from the late 70s, and it was basically about the rise of brown bread. People were really talking as though brown bread was something, quite new and surprising, although obviously it's closer to, just homemade wholemeal bread.
That's exactly the kind of vox pop that I love to watch on YouTube. People in the 1970s talk about the introduction of brown bread. I can just imagine it. I can see what they're wearing.
It's all very like faded palettes and women who are in headscarves, and then they suddenly talk about their 7-year-old son or something, and you're like, wait, how old are you?
And they're a combination of people who are trying to get away from the camera and those who desperately want to be there for another half hour.
Yeah. Even though they have no teeth. I love that.
Turkey is the number one consumer of bread in the world. Per capita, people there consume 199 kilograms of bread per year, which is 3 times their own body weight, again, per capita.
They're at the nexus of all the great dips, though, aren't they? So that makes sense.
Absolutely.
True.
And if you think about it, of all the restaurants you go to, who gives you the surplus of bread? It's the Turks, isn't it?
Turks and Spanish.
Because there's bread when you sit down, there's bread served with the appetizers. When you finish the basket of bread, there's always then a free refill of the bread. It's like the bread is like the salt and pepper in the Turkish menu, isn't it? So for a bonus point, do you know when the electric kettle was invented? Anyone got a guess on the electric kettle? I'll accept a year. I will not accept a century.
1952.
Oh, I was going to say 1951. That's not very interesting, is it? 1959.
Aaron, did you know it was 1952, or are you just incredible?
I am just that incredible. I didn't know. No.
That's amazing. You're bang on. 1952. William Russell invented the electric kettle. Well, the first electric kettle that automatically switched off, which I'm taking to be the benchmark for the first electric kettle. Before that, you could plug in some hot water and it would just burn your house down if you didn't come back in the room. Which is what travel kettles still do sometimes. Beware. I've been burned, literally.
Tomorrow.
Should we do Ness and Dormer? Should we do that? Or should we just do Tonight from West Side Story again?
Love the show? Support the show. Patreon.com/retrospectors. Part of the Acast Creator Network.